But Dave, let's head into our last topic. And first off, if you are not a patron of Most Valid Podcast, first off, what are you guys doing? Patreon.com/Most Valid Podcast is how you help support the channel. And the reason why I'm bringing it up again is because we are blessed to have one of our loyal patrons, Pat, calling in today, wanting to talk about some college football. Pat, how you doing on this beautiful Monday evening that we're recording the podcast on?
I'm pretty good. Thanks for having me on again. And I think we're talking about basketball now.
Yeah, I was so confused.
Did I say football?
You said college football.
I meant basketball. See, that's the usual Ricky thing of like the brain is thinking one thing and the mouth goes, nah, dude, I'm going to do my own thing.
I was so confused. Like, I'm just looking across and like, what?
Pat, you can't see it, but Dave shot me a look and like I'm giving him the smile like, yeah.
He's like, I nailed that intro.
And Dave's like, what are you doing? But yes, we're talking college basketball, and what we are talking about is Shaka Smart, and kind of the way that I phrased this for the topic on YouTube is, I believe, I'm going to pull up my text messages because I sent it to Dave today.
We're very professional on this.
Yeah.
You know, we have it together, we're prepped.
Usually it's an email, but today I texted it, and it's, should Texas move on from Shaka Smart? So, Pat, I'm going to kick it to you, and basically you're going to kind of start us off of where we're going to go with what you want to talk about with Shaka, because overall, I'll be honest, looking at the records, Shaka has not been too impressive since he's come over to Texas in 2015.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I think about Shaka Smart throughout his whole time at Texas, and when you look at this year and kind of assessing, when talking to my friend who went to Texas and kind of assessing, like, what do they think of Shaka, it's surprising that there's not as much like urgency or rumors going around that this might be his last year at Texas or that he's on the hot seat, which doesn't make sense considering what he's done. He is 71-66, I believe, at Texas, which when he was originally hired there, they had such high expectations for Shaka. They were thinking, we got Final Fours, we're going to win some Big 12 conferences, we're going to be a major player in college basketball again. But since he's been there, they have not won a conference championship. They have not won a tournament. He's only been to the actual tournament twice, and he hasn't gotten past the first round out of either of his tournament appearances. So basically, his expectations for what he's brought in to do and what he's actually done, and the fact that there doesn't seem to be this urgency around him being on the hot seat, or maybe Texas looking for a new head coach, is really strange to me, considering what he was brought in to do and what he hasn't done as Texas's head basketball coach.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing I was kind of thinking of coming into this, is I know that this past year, 21-16 overall, and they went to the NIT, which is the losers bracket, and they won the losers bracket, which is good for them.
Right.
But really the NIT is basically, you didn't get into the tournament? Here, play in this tournament. Where I just remember like guys like Ben Simmons were like, nah, I'm good, bro.
But you don't want your participation trophy?
Basically. Like they beat the Jackrabbits of South Dakota State in the NIT championship, which was good for South Dakota State. But Texas, like Pat was saying, should have higher aspirations. And the thing that I look at as the big thing is if you look at his two basic tenures of VCU and Texas. At VCU, they completely owned the conference. 11-7, 12-6, 15-3, 12-4, 12-4, 12-6. And that second three was first they were in the CAA, the Colonial Athletic Association. Then in 2012 they moved to the A10 because the conferences kind of shook up. And they still went to a new conference and 12-4, 12-4, 12-6. So it's not like they were chopped liver in the smaller non-Power 5 conferences. But at Texas, it was 11-7, then 4-14 in that dismal 11-22 year. And then the past 2 years have been 8-10. So for me, I kind of feel like that's a big thing, is like what you said, Pat, of first off, not competing in the Big 12. Like, he's finished, the highest he's finished was his first year without his recruits they finished 4th. Other than that, he's been 6th at the highest, 10th at the lowest, and they haven't made it out of the first round in either of his 2 appearances. Is that the big reason that should create a shadow, even though they did go 21-16 this past year?
Yeah, I got to agree, because especially considering the roster that Texas has had and not being able to utilize that roster and coach them in a way that helps them win in the Big 12, especially because recruiting wise hasn't been an issue for Shaka Smart. The past 2 years, he's turned in top 15 recruiting classes. He's recruited guys like Jared Allen and Mo Bamba and Jackson Hayes this past year. Mm-hmm. So the talent is not the issue. You can argue that there's been some issues where like he's recruited big guys, but he hasn't put enough shooters around them for it to be effective, which you can argue is valid. But a guy like Shaka Smart and the coach who is really penned for having that creative way to kind of how he was successful at VCU by using that havoc defense. And the fact that he hasn't been able to use that talent efficiently at Texas is really strange. And it's really, and especially this past year, when you look at Texas Tech and Chris Beard's job that they've done there and how they were able to catapult to the national championship game, winning the Big 12 conference for the first time in years. And Texas is over there looking like that's where we should be. Like, this is why we paid Shaka Smart all that money. And the fact that they're not, and the fact that another school in Texas is kind of reaching that level that they thought they would be, must be kind of infuriating to them, even if they're not a traditional basketball school. That's got to hurt in another way that another school in your state kind of got what you had wanted to reach all those years ago.
What's kind of going through your head, Dave? Because like even when before we went on the air, the big thing you mentioned is kind of like what Pat just mentioned. They've had guys who Mo Bamba, Jackson Hayes.
It's a university of center. Like, basically. I get it. You're there to prep centers for the NBA, but I think you kind of hit on it, Pat, when you talked about like where's your offense role around that center. You have such a big key piece to your team by locking down one of the most talented centers in the last couple of drafts in a row now, especially defensively, just lock down stalwart centers, and not being able to put out the team on the court that's able to hit shots or at least keep the ball moving around them, because there's always been questions about utilization on the outside for the guards. And like Kerwin Roach was awesome, but at the same time, like he's a limited player, and I felt like he was almost playing it safe. Shaka was almost playing it safe at times, sticking to some of the more senior guys and not letting the kids run with it as much as they could have, perhaps. So, you talked about the creativity that we saw out of him in his past coaching role. I don't know if, where he was this year, because I agree. I think he's starting to hit that wall of like, all right, man, this is year 2, year 3. Like, where is the success going to come? Because if you're not hitting it now with these guys, like, you're turning over basically an entire recruiting like generation almost, and you have yet to produce at the level we hope out of you.
Here's the thing I'm kind of thinking is, first off, when you mentioned centers, the thing that makes me chuckle is out of the 3 commits that they have for 2019, 2 of them are centers. And I know you lost Jackson Hayes, so you got to replace him. But I just chuckle to where it's like, well, we're going to see the next big man at Texas kind of own. Because like Pat even mentioned, Jared Allen, Mo Bamba, Jackson Hayes. Yeah. The question I want to shoot your way, Pat, has to do with Shaka Smart in the tournament. If we look at VCU, he went to the tournament 5 of his 6 years. The first year was the kind of media darling story of they went to the Final Four, and I wanted to pull up really quick who they beat in that. So in that run, they were the 11th seed, upset Georgetown, upset number 3 Purdue. Sorry, Matt. They upset number 10 Florida State in overtime, and then beat number 1 Kansas before losing in the Final Four. Then he goes to the second round twice in a row in 2012, the year that Kentucky won. And then Atlanta, I believe that was the year that Michigan lost to Louisville in the national title. And then other than that, he hasn't made it out of the first round, either at VCU and Texas. And at Texas, 2016, they lost in a heartbreaking game to Northern Iowa, where it was 75-72, and we were all watching that game thinking, oh my God, is Northern Iowa going to do it again? Because it was just shades of what they did earlier to Kansas many years ago. And then Northern Iowa almost beat Texas A&M the second game, which went to double overtime. That one, I believe, it was the play on like the baseline that was like out of bounds. I believe it was out of bounds on Northern Iowa and flipped the game.
When Texas A&M scored like 13 points in like the final minute.
Yes, yeah. And that's what
I remember that.
propelled them to the victory. And then last year's tournament in 2018, they were a 10 seed. They go into overtime with Nevada, bless you, Dave, and they lose to the Martin twins. The Martin twins beat them. I mean, I get they were the higher seed, but it's like you lose to two low. It's not like you lost to Power 5 teams in the tournament. You lost to teams that I'm going to say you should have beat, because I picked Texas to beat Nevada. And I know Nevada went on to go to the Sweet 16. They lost to our underdogs here in Chicago, the Loyola, what even is their mascot? I don't even know at this point. The Ramblers, that's it. The Loyola of Chicago Ramblers. But Pat, is that the problem? That is Shaka Smart a guy, except for that 1 year that went to the Final Four, is he a coach that maybe we expected too much out of, especially in tournament play?
So I actually looked this question up today, and there was one article that kind of spoke to me a little bit about how Shaka Smart has had to change his coaching as he's gotten to Texas. Mm-hmm. You know, when he left VCU for Texas, he immediately said that he was not going to bring his Havoc defense that was so successful for him in the tournament over to Texas, because his original reason was, well, I have the talented players now. Like, I don't really need that kind of defense anymore. Mm-hmm. But another thing was that if he wanted to get top recruits and like these top centers to come to Texas, he had to tell them, like, I'm not doing that kind of style anymore, because these guys don't want to play that kind of style, because that's not going to help them get to the NBA.
Yeah.
So I feel like he's kind of been like a victim of like these very high like circumstances at like a big Power 5 university like Texas, which produces a lot of NBA talent, where they're kind of like, well, if you want the big talent, we kind of have to play this way. Mm-hmm. And you kind of have to readjust to that. And I thought that Shaka Smart would more adjust to that than what we've kind of seen in these past 4 years. Like, I think after my first 2 years, I could kind of understand that, because like you're adjusting to Texas, you're adjusting to the Big 12 play. That's understandable. But the fact that he kind of hasn't figured out a way to like coach around that and with that is kind of a little concerning at this point. Especially that's why I think that his job on urgency should be a little more heated up than what I think it is right now, considering that he's had all this time and he hasn't been able to do that.
Yeah.
And that's why I'll throw this at you, Dave. This just hit me while Pat was talking. It kind of reminds me of like, Shaka needs to understand, because like part of me is like, well, why wouldn't you bring it? Because like that made you so successful.
Yeah.
He's got to understand, you're not Coach K. You're not Coach Calipari at Kansas. You're not the guy that, and I'm not trying to like talk him down, but he's not Coach K. Where Zion, RJ, and Cam go to Duke because they want to play for Coach K. Coach K is on a whole different level.
Yeah.
To where maybe you got to bite the bullet and say, hey, you know what? If I lose a guy like Mo Bamba who doesn't want to play that, whatever. I will find a guy who can play my defense and give us success, because the bottom line has to be winning games, no matter who's out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting balance, because as a college coach, I'd imagine you want to do what's best for the kids on your team to succeed, and, you know, whether that means winning in college or winning by going to the NBA and being drafted highly, like, you have to balance that. And like you said, if you're bringing in incredibly talented young players like Mo Bamba and Jackson Hayes and Jared Allen, you've got to be concerned about that, because that's their goal. Yeah. But for guys who are maybe a little bit further down in that recruiting class, national championship is their goal. You know, everybody might have their own eyes set differently, so you have to balance that. And I think you kind of hit that on the head, is like, can you achieve them both in the same thing? If you're a truly special coach like Coach K, yes, that's possible. But when you're working, you know, talented but not the very upper echelon of just uber loaded draft classes, I wonder if he's compromising himself too much in that situation to try to placate around the top ranked players coming out of that class.
Like a perfect example of what you just said is Dylan Osterowski, where he's a guy, senior this year. We haven't talked about him in the draft. We haven't even put it, like, I haven't even seen him in the second round for anything because he's the type of guy where it's like, this is my jam. Like, college is my kind of time to shine, and there might not be an NBA for some of these players to where I kind of sit back and I go, because Coach K, and I use K and Calipari.
Yeah.
And those are the two I stick by because, like, Bill Self has kind of, I'm going to say, fallen off a little bit at Kansas. Kansas ain't what it used to be.
What about Roy?
Roy, even UNC, like, they've had success, but
he plays a system, and you don't go to the NBA.
Basically. But, like, even with UNC, like, I don't think of them as a powerhouse nationally that I once did in the tournament. Where they've had good years, like the year they went up against Villanova in the national championship, but then look at the next year. It's not like, well, they're a consistent Final Four team.
Fair enough.
Like they used to be when it was when like Tyler Hansbrough was on that
Psycho team.
But the thing I go back to is he's got to understand, I'm not Coach K. I'm not, like, Calipari is the big one because Calipari has done exactly what you said, where it's basically, I'll get you to the NBA. I care about you and what you want to do. So all these top recruits that want to go to the NBA are like, dude, I'll play for Kentucky because I know this guy has my back and he's going to get me to where I want to go. Shaka Smart, I don't think has, like, Shaka could veer into that.
Yeah.
But me as a recruit, if Shaka sat there and was like, I'm going to get you the NBA and I'm going to help you, I'd look at him and go, how?
Unless I'm 7 feet tall. How?
Like, exactly. Like, how? You're at VCU, now you're at Texas, where at least Coach Cal, I know he has connections in the NBA. He knows what it's like to be in the NBA, to where it's like, maybe there's a step of that. Maybe with Coach K, it's like he's coached USA basketball, so he's worked with NBA prospects. So maybe that's a little bit of it, to where I kind of sit there and go, yo, Shaka, like, I know you want to kind of be on your high horse and say, I'm not going to use that gimmicky defense, but part of me is like, if it's going to win you games, pull out the gimmicky defense and go to work. What are you kind of thinking right now, Pat?
I'm kind of thinking that I think that a lot of the criticism around Shaka's teams has been like they can't shoot or they don't have the dominant guard play that's needed. And unfortunately, I think a lot of that was kind of dismissed with like the tragic thing that happened to Andrew Jones. Andrew Jones was supposed to be that key guard for that team to help run that offense. And unfortunately, when he was diagnosed with leukemia, that was really awful to hear. But at the same time, it kind of took away from what he wanted his guard play to be. And I hear he's coming back this year, which is really awesome. And I'm really glad for him. But I think that his lack of consistent guard play, the best guard he has had at Texas was Isaiah Taylor, and he didn't recruit him. He was a Rick Barnes guy.
Yes.
So I think that complete lack of dominant guard play kind of detracted from all of those top center recruits that he's kind of brought in over these years. And I think that's got to be a big reason why they're kind of stuck in the middle of like, we're not a bad program, but we're not a really elite one either. I also take slight difference. I still think Kansas is a real elite program despite the terrible, disappointing year that we had. And I will be the first to say this is the worst Kansas season we've ever played. But
as I said it, I'm like, I wonder what Pat's going to say being a UK alum. Can I get away with this?
It's a KU alum, UK
KU,
Kentucky.
UK's Kentucky.
Come on, man.
But yeah, when I think about Texas, they're still stuck in that no man's land, and I think they were just hurt by just really unforeseen circumstances. But I still think that despite those circumstances, they probably should have found a way around it, but they just didn't. They haven't been able to do it.
The last thing I'll say before I throw out the question of should he be on the hot seat, I'm going to throw out the should he be on the hot seat and will he survive the season? So that's the question I want you guys to kind of prep for while I make this last statement. The two teams that I think that are not Texas that are going to play heavy hands in what happens with Shaka after the season is Illinois and Memphis. And the reason why I say that is first I'll start with Memphis. Dave, I was talking about their recruiting class to you before Pat even
We've
called.
been talking about this recruiting class for months now.
It is stacked. It is stacked. And part of me feels like, and I know that the whole Penny Hardaway thing of like embracing Memphis and like go bring Memphis guys in and we're going to do this for Memphis. If they shock the world, and I'm saying shock the world, like if they're a 1 seed basically and a powerhouse this year, if I'm Texas, I'm looking like, this first year, he's already doing that. What are you doing? And then Illinois, where Brad Underwood, I know this would be his 3rd year there, building a team. If Illinois is able to make some noise and make the tournament like successfully, yet again, if I'm Texas, I kind of give that side eye to Shaka Smart and go, yeah, Brad Underwood in his 3rd year is making, especially if Underwood and the Illini win a game or 2 in the tournament, then I'm really giving that side eye of like, why aren't we winning games in the tournament? And why are we losing to Northern Iowa and Nevada in these tournament games to where I feel like Shaka should be on the hot seat. I feel like Texas is not going to have a great year this year. They may make the tournament, get bounced in the first round. That's the best they'll do. I think he will sadly survive the year, but should be on the hot seat. Should he survive the year, though? No. I'll say he will survive the year. Should he survive the year? No. That's my prediction for Texas. Pat, we'll go to you first. What do you think with Shaka? What would be your prediction for Texas this year?
Yeah. So should he be on the hot seat? For all the reasons I talked about, yeah, he should be on the hot seat. I think right now he's like he's the top 15 paid coaches in all college basketball. And you look at the list of the ones with him, he's the only one in the last 5 years who has so little to show for in terms of conference championships, conference tournament wins, and just going far in making the tournament. So what he's being paid for at Texas is they're really not reaping what they're selling him out for. Should he survive the season? I feel like he is, because after everything I've read about Chris Del Conte, even though Chris Del Conte didn't hire him as a basketball coach, as the acting AD, he still has a very large amount of trust, and he's been very, very supportive of Shaka Smart, being like, no, we're not talking about this. He's our guy. We're not getting rid of him. We're not even discussing it. And every time he's been asked that question, he's kind of reacted the same way. So, and that's really interesting, especially for an AD that didn't hire their basketball coach. But that probably has a lot to do with the humongous $13 million buyout that Shaka Smart would be owed if he was fired. So I think for that buyout alone, he survives the season. But should he survive the season? If they start off the same way they started the past 4 years, I really don't see a reason to keep him on. But I feel like just because of money, and because Texas doesn't want to pay Charlie Strong $10 million and Shaka Smart $13 million at the same time to go away, I think they'll probably keep him during the season.
What do you think, Dave?
I think that he is if he's going anywhere, I think it's on his choice to leave. I'm digging in on the Michigan thing. I think that's kind of fun.
I mean, hey, that job is still open.
It's open. He's up for consideration. And I think if I read this correctly, I saw a thumbs up from Billy Donovan on him, which should just scare everyone.
Yeah.
That right there should tell you just walk away. But
just walk away.
I have to agree. I have to agree that he should be on a hot seat. If he is still at Texas this year, there is no way that you can tolerate this level of just middling around at a program that big. I get it. You're Texas. Football is your thing. But still, basketball, you've had some amazing alums in basketball go through that program. And, you mentioned Memphis being able to turn around and go back with Anthony Hardaway and really rejuvenate that program. And I look at Texas and I'm like, looking through the alums from there, I'm like, I wonder if anybody in there is coaching AAU right now. I wonder if they're in the scene like Anthony was a couple years ago. Because Penny, he did it right. He went up, he got the kids young, and then he established himself as he's a really smart coach, smart guy. And then he goes, okay, I'm going to go coach at college. And if you guys want to play for me again, because you guys enjoyed that so much, come on over to Memphis. We've got legitimate coaches. We've got recruiting that's going to be done here by NBA level scouts. They set themselves up for success. I think Shaka Smart has not done that for Texas, and I think that in order to get to that next level, Texas should move on from him.
And the thing that I'm looking at here is, I looked it up because of what Pat said. This was the 2019 coaches' pay. So this is what they made last year, I believe, and then it has their buyout as of April of this year. Pat was right on. It's about $13.8 million buyout for Shaka. If we're going off of total pay with his bonus that he gets, Shaka Smart makes $3.2 million at Texas. There are 14 schools and coaches ahead of him, but just some of the guys that are below him, that's like, why? Lon Kruger, with how successful he's been in Oklahoma, he gets paid less than Shaka Smart. You also have Matt Painter at Purdue. I know he hasn't had tournament success, but he gets paid. Chris Beard is lower than Shaka. The big one for me is Jim Boeheim. Boeheim only makes $2.6 million to be the coach of Syracuse. That blows my mind just because I would think Jim Boeheim better coach than Shaka Smart. And then I'll say the other ones are newer head coaches, lower head coaches. The only one that I would think maybe is like, wow, I can't believe he's so low is Jim Larinaga for Miami, makes just over $2 million last year. But the only schools on top of him, the 14, Tennessee, Indiana, Wichita, Utah, Michigan, West Virginia, Villanova, UNC, Louisville, Kansas, Virginia, Michigan State. Number 2.
It's a long list.
Who's number 2? Is it Duke or Kentucky?
I don't know.
It's Duke.
It's Duke.
And then the top guy is John Calipari, who makes $9.2 million a year.
That seems all right.
And if they wanted to buy him out this year, Dave, they would have to pay him $25 million to buy out Coach Cal.
Yeah, there's no reason to ever buy out Coach Cal.
Whereas the Tom Izzo buyout is a $5.3 million. So just to put it in perspective of 1 to 2. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think about Shaka Smart. Should he be fired? Should he be on the hot seat? What are you thinking? Are you with
Should he just leave town and go to Michigan?
Leave town and go to Michigan? Apparently, there are people that I've seen with the Michigan thing is that there are Michigan blogs I've seen that are like, go target Billy Donovan. Like, go target him. I'm like, dude, he's not going to leave the NBA unless they fire him.
They should go get Juwan Howard, to be honest.
That is who I want. I saw
there's
that
some
name,
alumni.
and I went, he would be perfect for that job. I don't know if they win games, but he's the alumni that I would fight for that one. But make sure to support us on Patreon. If you want to be like Pat and join a podcast and talk about what you want to talk about each and every month, join us at the gold tier, but just as low as $1, you can get the MVP podcast a month early. You can join our Discord server. Retro, Jake, Hubertus, Dave, myself, Mark, Sean, all the MVP guys are in there. Pat, I don't think you're in there. We're going to have to get you into that Discord server so you can join the conversation, but also rate and review the podcast on iTunes. Every 5-star rating helps us get into the ears of more people. Want to thank Pat for joining us. Want to thank Dave for being across the table. Dave @Dave_don't_tweet. I'm at Ricky Widmer. Most Valuable Pod is Most Valuable Podcast. And as always, have a good day, everybody.